Hey, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Mitch Resnick, a professor at the MIT Media Lab and one of the founders of the Clubhouse. So I always love coming to the Clubhouse annual conferences. So it's great to be here. Of course, it's really frustrating not to be together in person because I always get so inspired seeing all of you and getting together and hearing about what you're doing at your clubhouses. And to be honest, I can't even see you on this, live stream. So I always get inspired even just seeing all of you because it's just a wonderful collection of people. So it's frustrating this year. I look forward to seeing you at other opportunities, but glad at least to be able to share some ideas. And also happy that some other people from our team at the MIT Media Lab and the Scratch team will also be joining you over the next few days. I know that Jaleesa Trapp will be presenting later today on embedding social justice practices in your clubhouse. My close colleague, Rupal Jain, a wonderful, wonderful educator, will be doing a session jointly with Sherry, AKA Michel, on spoken word poetry with stop motion animation. So I'm sure that'll be exciting. And we have a couple Scratch related workshops as well, a face sensing workshop today and a social justice superhero workshop. So I hope some of those will be able to share some of the spirit and ideas that we're working on at the Media Lab and on Scratch. I was going to talk today, I called it, We're All in This Together. And I was going to start with a story from about 50 years ago, because it was about 50 years ago that people first went to the moon. Actually, it was between 1969 and 1972. There were a dozen people who went to the moon. But in fact, as I look back, the most important thing was not what people found on the moon, but rather what they saw when they looked back at the Earth, as in this photo. Because I think people got a new perspective. When they traveled to the moon, it was the first time they could look back and see the Earth just as an object sitting there alone in space. I think for a lot of people, it gave them the sense that you don't see the borders, you don't see the different things that divide people. You see this one big sphere traveling through, and it drove home the point that we're all on this same spherical ship that's sailing through space together. Some people even say that it helped give momentum to the environmental movement, which surged in the 1970s, because people saw that we're together on the Earth and we need to do things to be able to sustain this ecosystem that's sustaining us. So the same way that traveling away helped give us some new perspective on the Earth 50 years ago, I'm hoping that a similar thing might be happening now. Obviously, in the last year, we've been through a big challenge with the pandemic, and people have been isolated and secluded from one another, not able to connect with friends and close family. And obviously, it's been a really challenging time. People have been separated. Even when we get together on screens, we're in our own little boxes. So it's definitely been a time where it has been challenging. Of course, it's also highlighted some of the inequities in the world, and the virus has affected different people in very different ways and has led to some of the biggest hardships for people who face the greatest challenges. But despite all of these challenges, I think there's some possibilities that the pandemic might give us some new perspective. And I start to see some hopeful signs as I've looked at and seen how some people are thinking about life as we emerge beyond the pandemic. Here's an article that appeared in the New York Times last month, and it highlighted some teenagers and how they were expressing themselves about life in the pandemic through their artwork. And I was really struck by this one by an 18-year-old named Ryan Daniel. And you can see the artwork that he produced. And he said, "This piece, a picture I sketched of my little sister inside a box, depicts the entrapment and isolation felt by so many people during quarantine. This is the new normal for my generation. We have grown together, and we are now capable of deeply connecting through shared experience." And for me, this was a bright spot and gave me hope. Clearly, the image is a really, such a sad image. And he talks about the entrapment and isolation, but he also talks about growing together and showing a deep connection through shared experience. And my hope is that the same way that people 50 years ago had to travel 250,000 miles away to see that we're all in it together on the earth, perhaps the isolation of the last year will help people see the importance of connection. Because for me, that's one of the most important things we can learn is how important connection is and how much we've missed it over the past year. I think this comes up as we think about the world of learning and education. There was another article in the New York Times that caught my attention. I love the title. It was a simple title, Make Schools More Human. And the subtitle says, the pandemic showed us that education was broken. It also showed us how to fix it. There's an article written by John Mehta, a professor at Harvard Graduate School of Education. And the following line from the article really jumped out at me. He wrote, classrooms that are thriving during the pandemic are the ones where teachers have built strong relationships and warm communities, whereas those that focus on compliance are really struggling. And again, this is, for me, another sign of hope that I think he was pointing out that we've seen that the classrooms that were succeeding were the ones that were focusing on connectedness and focusing on the person, making learning more human. And those that were just focused on following the rules, they were the ones that were struggling. And I do think this connects to some of the core principles underlying the Clubhouse. All of you as coordinators of Clubhouse focus on building those strong relationships and warm communities, as he says. And Clubhouse is not just about following the rules, but establishing those connections and relationships and communities. And for me, at least, that the pandemic has highlighted how important those relationships and connections and communities are. Now, of course, it's not a sure thing that everyone will see this. And in fact, I worry as kids go back to school, many schools will say they fell behind. We must push them harder and be more focused and drive them harder this year. And I think that'll be exactly the wrong thing. I think what's most important as we emerge from the pandemic is to make sure to value those relationships and connections and communities. We've seen that's what works during the pandemic, but that's what will lead us to succeed both in schools and outside of schools as we move beyond the pandemic. I think we've seen some of these same things in our own work over the past year, the importance of connection and how much young people are yearning for and striving for connection. Let me give a few examples from our Scratch online community that I know a lot of you have used at your clubhouses. The first example was a project that actually was suggested by an educator in Spain. And he suggested this project called Hack Your Window. And he suggested that people take a picture of their window, then animate outside something that they imagined outside their window. And it was just wonderful, the collection of things that people created in Scratch. They created games like a doctor who's killing the viruses, by shooting off hearts, or a cat that's sitting on the windowsill, looking out at nature and also seeing a flying cat, the Scratch cat outside, or someone who's looking just at a blank wall. Then the wizard comes and they're able to see us into the ocean. So it's imagining what the possibilities might be and connecting to others. It was just exciting to see everybody taking a piece of themselves while they were isolated inside, but sharing what they were imagining, and then them sharing and seeing what others are imagining around the world. I'm going to show a short video just to show a few of the other examples. Hundreds of projects came from this. I'll show a few of them here. I just love the variety of projects. At the Clubhouse, we always say an indicator of success is when you see variety. So you can see here the incredible range and diversity of imaginations that kids around the world have and that they're sharing with one another. So kids, even while isolated, were finding ways to connect with one another. Let me give another example. It was a project by a member of the Scratch community whose username was Hello Yo What's Up. And as you can see, Hello Yo What's Up had more than 600 Scratch projects. She had been very active in the Scratch community. Actually, she was really active in in middle school. But then when she was in high school, she wasn't using Scratch so much. And actually last spring, she was a senior in high school, and she decided to come back to Scratch. And she posted this project very early in the pandemic. It was called Random Acts of COVID Kindness. And the idea of the project was, she said, everyone needs some kindness during this difficult time. So people could suggest someone that they felt needed to get some kindness. And then other people could create something for them, like writing a song or making an animation or a game to bring some happiness and spread some happiness. And I really like this is what Hello, Yo, What's Up wrote about why she wrote this. She said, it's been about 3 years since I last shared a project on Scratch, and nearly 7 years since the fateful day I joined this wonderful site. And then she explained, social isolation due to COVID-19 pandemic has given me the combination of free time, a desire to create something, and a need to spread kindness that brought me back here. Again, you can see that yearning for connection. And for me, it's what we're always looking for, whether online in Scratch or in person at Clubhouses, that idea of creating and connecting. A desire, she talks about a desire to create something, but then to share it with others. So it's creating and sharing and spreading kindness. So that combination of creating, collaborating, and kindness is what we're really looking for in learning. And when we see young people expressing themselves this way, it gives me hope. Let me give one final example from Scratch. We also know during the last year, it's been a time, of recognition of great social injustices and for people to be rising up to speak out on behalf and in support of racial justice and social justice. So quite a number of young people in the Scratch community were creating Scratch projects in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. Here's a video that shows some of their projects and them describing how they were, creating things with Scratch to express their ideas and connect with others.
The Black Lives Matter movement is to say that Black lives matter as much as other lives.
All people should be treated equal, and no one should be mistreated just because of their race and color.
Most people already think that white people matter. You don't need to say it.
Basically what it says, Black Lives Matter. Since I've been old enough to talk, it's been in everyday life. I feel like they shouldn't be treated this way anymore.
I realized that I needed to make a stand for this. I should at least do it for myself too.
My Black Lives Matter project starts with the fist that stands for unity and strength. I wanted to raise awareness, and because what happened with George Floyd, and not just him, what happened to other people in the past and present.
I just saw that the community was doing Black Lives Matter. I was really proud because finally I could actually show people that I cared about it. That was in a virtual protest of Black Lives Matter.
My Scratch project about Black Lives Matter is like a normal platformer, but the different thing is that Scratchers can learn about Black Lives Matter while playing the platformer.
The theme of my project is unity, and it's to say that in 2020, the most important thing is to remain united.
I was a little nervous because I thought some people will start arguments in the comments, and I thought some people would just ignore it. When people started to actually remix and put in their own fist, I realized that a bunch of people actually care.
I saw a lot of projects being made about Black Lives Matter in all sorts of ways. There were like poems, there were art.
When people are seeing your art, maybe can change the way they see the world.
It doesn't matter what your age is, because sometimes when you're younger, you're braver.
I can be a part of change, and I can also make an impact on the world.
I hope that Black lives don't get treated the same like they do now. I hope that they actually do matter like they're saying.
So I think you can see from from those projects how young people wanted to share their ideas, express their ideas, and connect with others. They want to remix each other's projects, to comment on each other's, to build, to work together towards bringing about change. And again, I see this as so hopeful that even as young people have been separated and isolated, they still have this desire to create and connect. And for us, I think I want to make sure that we find ways to continue to support them as we emerge from the pandemic, that we continue to provide young people with those opportunities to create and connect and with others. Because I think in order to deal with the big challenges that the world is facing, we need a next generation that grows up and connects. I want to end with just sharing a little bit about why some of these things have been so important to me and how I've come to care so much about people connecting and connecting on a global scale. And I'm going to tell about some of the things from my childhood. I sometimes get emotional, so put up with me if that happens. But when I was growing up, I went to a summer camp called Camp Boyberek. And it was a camp in New York, a little north of New York City. And the campers there were generally the children and grandchildren of Jewish immigrants who came to the United States in the early part of the last century, escaping persecution in different parts of the world. And those immigrants wanted their kids to spend some time out of the city, so they started this camp where kids would go to. But the camp had a special festival at the end of every summer. It was called Felker Yomtov, in the language Yiddish, which is what a lot of these immigrants spoke. Felker Yomtov meant holiday of the peoples. And at the end of every summer, the different bunks at the camp, each one would represent a different peoples of the world. As you can see on the images here, that has Japan, Japanese, and Austria, and Ivory Coast. And the campers would learn, they would dress up in the costumes, connected to the culture of the country, and they would learn the dances and sing the songs of the country. It was a way to get to understand different parts of the world and to drive home the message that it's, we're all in this together. To bring about change, we need to bring everyone together. So, even though these were from families that were escaping persecution, they weren't turned their back on the world. They said, we need to keep connection around the world in order to bring about the change that we need. At the end of this festival, the culminating song, and again, this was sung in the Yiddish language. I found this was from a 1966 songbook from this Felker Yomtov. And the song, the lyrics from the refrain, it says, "Wir seien die Völker, wir seien die Welt." And what that means is, we are the people, we are the world. So I think what the kids were saying is they were representing different, different peoples of the world, but they're all coming together to say, we are the people, we are the world. Now, this song was written in probably the 1930s or 1940s, long before the best-selling song, "We Are the World" in 1985. But I think, it was sort of part of the culture of this camp that it was important for kids to grow up recognizing that it's important to connect together with people that are different from yourselves, that we need to come together in order to bring about the important change. And there was a recognition that there's great inequities and people are persecuted around the world, but the way to bring about that change is by staying connected. And I think, the hope that I have as we come out of the pandemic is that that message will come across clearly, that the message that I grew up in, so for me, this was a camp I went to. This camp closed down in 1979. It's no longer open, but it still is in my heart. In fact, many of you have met Natalie Rusk, my close friend and longtime collaborator, who started the Clubhouse, and we worked together on Scratch. And Natalie says that she thinks that I worked on the Clubhouse on Scratch because I'm trying to recreate Felker Yomtov from my childhood. And I think she's partly right. I think this had an impact on me. And I think through the Clubhouse and through Scratch, is part of our goal is to bring together these ideas and to make sure that the young people around the world and educators around the world get a chance to connect and share and learn with one another so they can bring about change together. So I think I leave that as my final message, that just as 50 years ago, the view of the Earth from space, I think, helped launch the environmental movement of people caring about preserving the planet. And I hope the challenges of the last year can also help give us a new perspective and can help more people recognize, the importance of staying connected and sharing and learning with and from one another. And this will not happen on its own. It requires a community of people like you. And it's one reason I'm so happy and always, inspired by being part of the Clubhouse Network, because I do think it's a group of people who understands these ideas. So I hope that you also, as we move ahead, can help continue to spread those ideas. I know you're already doing it at your clubhouses and at gatherings like this that cut across, people from different backgrounds and different places. And I hope that we can try to help, have more people recognize the importance of that. Again, I'm so sorry I can't be seeing you right now and hugging you in the hallways, but I look forward to having other opportunities to get together in the coming year, and then certainly be together, next year at the Clubhouse Annual Conference. So stay healthy.